From the beginning of the Industrial Revolution, the Earth has tolerated the effects of human-caused climate change. Since then, the global temperature has increased by 1.01 degrees Celsius, and concentrated atmospheric levels of CO2 have elevated by 49%. In an attempt to understand the effects of climate change beyond the statistics, I interviewed a science teacher and 2 members of Ecology Club.
Climate change is a problem, so we can see it in the ocean, how it's like the ice caps, and I think it's in the middle of this century that the Arctic won't have any ice in the middle of the summer. And that's definitely, like, our sea levels will rise. If you think about our body temperatures have to live at, like, we have to be at 98.6 degrees Fahrenheit. And if the sea level rises, it's like the animals in the ocean are always in an elevated temperature. We don't really want that.
Yeah, climate change refers to, like, exactly what it sounds like. I think a lot of times people use global warming and climate change interchangeably, which in a way you kind of can. Climate change refers to, like, the broader picture. I think the thing that we're so worried about that's so urgent is global warming, right? Climate change is referring to all the effects of global warming and, like, everything else that's changing in the climate. Because the climate does naturally change with time, but with that argument being said, it hasn't ever to this extent. So the way I've just described climate change is just like everything you see happening that's changing is technically climate change. Like that includes like droughts or any like type of natural disaster. Really anything that has to do with the climate is going to be considered climate change.
I think another thing that's important to keep in mind is that the way that it's hurting us, like the way that people in Bellevue or in the US are going to see it is completely different than the way that people in places like third world countries are going to see it, because for them it can have a much worse effect. Because if you live in a place with an economy that doesn't have the resources, if you don't have the resources to bounce back, then it's devastating.
To be like, to look at the consumer and say that they need to buy an electric car instead of building a train system and building a city that's walkable is kind of unfair. And it is really up to corporations. So I would say the biggest thing you can do is not beat yourself up about it. I think a lot of people, there's this pushed idea that individuals need to be sustainable within their life, which you should. You shouldn't just try to create more waste. But you shouldn't feel bad about using a plastic bag. You shouldn't feel bad about not driving an electric car. I'd say the biggest thing you can do is just push for legislation that's gonna put caps on these companies, hold them accountable, because that's where the real difference is gonna be made. I talk about this a lot, but I work in a grocery store. I see how much waste they produce just, I would say, in like 2 hours. It's comparable to like the waste that you would produce in 6 months of your lifetime. To say that it's the individual's fault is just like completely not true. Like bigger corporations could be doing more, they're just choosing not to because it's cheaper, it's more convenient, and they've been doing it forever, so they can keep doing that. So I would say push for legislation to hold these companies accountable. Obviously make changes in your other life and in your life too, but don't beat yourself up for not doing enough, because in the end, you living zero waste isn't gonna be what's like gonna stop all of this, if that makes sense.
This much carbon is not meant to be in our atmosphere. This much greenhouse gases is not meant to be in our atmosphere. And so the effects that we're feeling of that shouldn't happen.
From what I understand, and I'm not a climate change expert, but what I understand is that we know that there's patterns, but we also know, like, if there wasn't climate change, we'd still be living in the ice age. And so we know that some climate change is going to happen naturally, but how much climate change is a result of the choices humans are making versus the natural things that our world just does.